A year. It had been exactly 1 year since Alex Wright's world shattered in two, before, and after. A year since the cold river waters had taken Anna, his wife, his anchor, his everything. For 365 days, the man had lived in a fog of grief, guilt, and endless what-ifs. The old house, where every corner reminded him of her, had become a mausoleum. Alex, a 34-year-old architect accustomed to building futures, realized he no longer had one. Moving was an act of desperation, a final attempt to cheat fate. A new house on a quiet suburban street. Faceless, memory-free, a blank slate. Alex hoped he could at least breathe here. The first few weeks were a mechanical routine, unpacking boxes, arranging furniture, trying to create some semblance of order in the outside world to drown out the chaos within. It was on one of those quiet nights that he heard it for the first time. Alex was standing in the second-floor bathroom, staring at his tired reflection in the mirror. The house was asleep, the street outside drowned in silence. And through that silence, a sound seeped in, a thin, barely perceptible thread. Crying. A soft, mournful cry, like a baby in the next room. He froze, listening. The walls in these houses were thin. The neighbors probably had a young child. He shrugged it off and went to bed. But the sound returned the next night. And the next. The crying was persistent, monotonous, and it seemed to be coming not from beyond the wall, but from somewhere inside the house. The architect walked through every room, pressing his ear to the walls, the vents. Nothing. On the fourth night, standing in the bathroom, he understood. The sound was coming from the sink drain. Alex leaned in, and a chill ran down his spine. The crying was coming from the bend in the pipe, from the darkness where water and grime collected. Now it sounded clearer. It wasn't just a cry, but a quiet, choked plea for help. "Help me!" it whispered from the darkness. The next day, Alex called a plumber. A portly man named Gus fiddled with the pipes for a long time, snaking them, shining a flashlight down them. "There's nothing in here, Mr. Wright," he concluded, wiping his hands. "Just a small clog, I cleared it out. Maybe it was just air in the pipes, making that noise." But Alex knew it wasn't air. That night, he went back to the bathroom. Silence. He was starting to think Gus had actually fixed something. He washed his face, brushed his teeth, and was about to leave when it started again. Louder than ever. It was no longer a cry, but a desperate, terrified child's scream that seemed to vibrate through the pipes, the walls, the very floor beneath his feet. Alex staggered back, pressing himself against the door. He covered his ears with his hands, but the scream wasn't outside anymore. It was inside his head. And just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. A ringing silence fell. Alex slowly lowered his hands. He stood motionless, afraid to breathe. And in that silence, right next to his ear, came a distinct, icy whisper. "I'm so cold." Alex didn't sleep all night. He sat in the kitchen with a cup of cold coffee, trying to find a rational explanation. Auditory hallucinations. The effects of stress and sleep deprivation. Grief taking on an ugly, bizarre form. He clung to these explanations like a drowning man to a straw. The next day, he called Mark, his best friend, a pragmatic lawyer for whom anything that couldn't be proven or touched simply didn't exist. "Come over. I think I'm losing my mind," Alex pleaded. Mark arrived that evening. Alex told him everything, the crying, the screams, the whisper. His friend listened with sympathy, but skepticism was clear in his eyes. "Buddy, you've been through hell. Your brain is just trying to cope with the trauma. Let's hang out, have a beer. Things will look different in the morning." They sat up late into the night. Mark talked about work, told jokes, doing everything he could to distract Alex. The house was quiet. Completely quiet. "See?" the lawyer said as they were about to part ways. Silence. You just needed to talk to someone. But when Mark left and the house was once again plunged into solitude, the sounds returned. First, the soft crying, then the desperate scream. Alex grabbed his phone, turned on the voice recorder, and held it to the drain. He had to get proof. For Mark. For himself. The architect recorded for several minutes until the screams subsided. With trembling fingers, he pressed stop, and then play. Only a soft, steady white noise came from the speaker. No screams. No crying. Despair began to curdle into fear. If it wasn't in the house, then it was in his head. And that was even more terrifying. He spent the next few days in a fog. During the day, he tried to work, to draft blueprints, but he couldn't focus. The nights became an agony of waiting. The whispers grew more insistent, closer. "Help me, I'm scared, why aren't you coming?" Alex decided to dig deeper. He went to the town archives to research the history of his new home. After a few hours searching through dusty files, he found what he was looking for. The Henderson family. They had lived in the house 10 years ago. A husband, a wife, and their 8-year-old son, Daniel. One autumn evening, the boy was playing in the backyard near a small creek that ran behind the property, and he vanished. The police searched for weeks. They combed the entire area, drained the creek. But they found nothing. No body, no signs of a struggle. Daniel Henderson had simply disappeared. The family couldn't bear to live in the house where everything reminded them of their son, and sold it soon after. Alex sat in the archives, cold sweat trickling down his back. He stared at the faded photograph of a smiling, freckle-faced boy. Daniel. That night, for the first time, the whisper from the pipe said his name. "Alex. Help me, Alex." The knowledge brought no relief, only deepening the horror. The ghostly voice now had a face, the face of the smiling boy from the photograph. Alex tried to convince himself it was just a coincidence, that his tormented mind had latched onto a tragic story and projected it onto his hallucinations. But deep down, he knew he was lying to himself. The presence in the house was becoming more palpable. He started catching movements in the corner of his eye, dark shadows that slipped through doorways and vanished the moment he turned. Sometimes, it felt like a small figure was standing behind him in the reflection of a window. And then something new began. One morning, Alex turned on the bathroom faucet to wash his face, and a thin trickle of black, oily liquid poured out with the water. It left grimy streaks on the pristine white sink and smelled of river silt. A stale, nauseating odor of decay and stagnant water. Disgusted, Alex turned off the tap. A few seconds later, the blackness vanished, and clear water flowed again. This started happening more frequently. The black sludge would appear in the kitchen sink, in the shower, even in the toilet tank. It was as if the house itself was sick, its circulatory system, the plumbing, infected with something dark and rotting. The climax came a week later. Alex woke in the middle of the night to a strange sound, not a scream, but a quiet splashing. He stepped out of his bedroom and froze. The bathroom door was ajar, and a dark puddle was seeping from underneath it onto the hallway carpet. With his heart pounding, he pushed the door open. The bathtub was filled almost to the brim with that same black, opaque liquid. The surface was perfectly still, like a black mirror. And on that black surface, bobbing gently, was a bright yellow rubber duck. A toy he had never owned. Alex stared, paralyzed with horror. The duck slowly drifted toward the drain. As it got closer, it suddenly, unnaturally, flipped over and was pulled under the water, as if an unseen hand had snatched it. That broke his stupor. He lunged for the tub and pulled the plug. The black water began to drain with gurgles and slurps, leaving disgusting, grimy streaks on the tub's walls. When the water was gone, Alex peered into the drain. From the darkness, a soft, gurgling laugh echoed up. And then a whisper, colder and clearer than ever before. "You're next." That was the last straw. Alex no longer tried to find explanations or fight back. His only desire was to run. To run without looking back, as far away from this cursed house as possible. At dawn, he began frantically packing. He didn't care what he was grabbing. He just threw clothes, documents, and his laptop into a duffel bag. Every creak of the floorboards made him flinch. He felt as if the house were watching him, holding its breath. The voices in the pipes were silent, But that silence was worse than any scream. Alex ran outside, threw the bag into the back seat of his car, and got behind the wheel. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely get the key into the ignition. He turned the key. Click. And nothing. He tried again. And again. The engine was dead. The battery was fine. He'd checked it just last week. Panic began to flood him. He jumped out of the car and ran to the front door of the house to call a cab. He pulled the handle. Locked. He took out his keys and tried to open it. The key wouldn't turn in the lock, as if it were jammed. He ran around the house, yanking on window handles, the back door. Everything was sealed tight. He was trapped on his own property. Stepping back to the middle of the lawn, Alex stared at the house that just yesterday had seemed like his salvation, and now had become his prison. And in that moment he heard a sound. A loud, distinct click. It was the sound of the latch on the front gate closing. Alex turned slowly. In the large living room window, in the dark reflection of the glass, he saw a figure standing right behind him. A small boy. The architect spun around. There was no one behind him. Just an empty lawn. He looked at the window again. The figure was still there, in the reflection. It wasn't moving, just standing and watching him. And then the voices returned. But now they weren't coming from the pipes. They were coming from everywhere. From under the roof, from beneath the ground, from the crowns of the trees. Dozens of children's voices whispering in unison, weaving into a sinister chorus. You won't leave. You won't leave. You promised to help. You won't leave. Alex collapsed to his knees, covering his ears with his hands. But it was useless. The whispers were everywhere. The house had caught him. And it had no intention of letting go. In a panic bordering on madness, Alex dialed the only number that came to mind. Elena. Anna's sister. She was a psychotherapist, a person whose profession was to make sense of the chaos in the human mind. Lena, help me, he rasped into the phone when she answered. I'm trapped. It won't let me out. He incoherently told her everything, jumping from one thing to another, the voices, the black water, the locked doors, the figure in the reflection. There was so much genuine terror in his voice that Elena's professional skepticism began to crack. She wasn't hearing the ravings of a madman, but a cry for help from a man on the edge. Alex, calm down. Where are you now? Her voice was steady and calm, an anchor in his storm. At my house. I can't get out. I'm on my way. Just breathe. I'll be there in an hour. An hour. 60 minutes in the company of a monster. That hour felt like an eternity to Alex. The entity, as if sensing he had called for help, intensified its attacks. The whispering stopped, replaced by actions. A book lying on the porch table flipped a page with a loud rustle. The garden swing began to move slowly, creaking, though there was no wind. Alex huddled in a corner of the porch, his eyes fixed on the house. The worst was yet to come. He glanced at his reflection in the glass door. For a moment, instead of his own face, he saw Anna's. Distorted with pain, her lips blue, seaweed in her hair. She stared at him with a silent reproach, her lips soundlessly mouthing. Why didn't you save me? It was a blow below the belt. The entity had found his most vulnerable spot, his unrelenting guilt. When Elena's car finally pulled up to the house, Alex was on the verge of a breakdown. He watched as she opened the gate without any trouble, walked to the front door, and to his astonishment, it opened easily for her. There were no barriers for her. Elena entered the house and saw Alex, pale, trembling, with wild eyes. She saw and heard none of the things he had described. The house was quiet, the swing was still. But she saw his condition. And that was enough. Alex, you need to get out of here, she said firmly. I tried. It wouldn't let me, he exclaimed. I'm here now. It won't dare do anything. Let's go to my place. She helped him pack his bag. He was silent the whole drive, staring out the window. In Elena's bright, modern apartment, he felt a little better. There were no dark corners or old pipes here. But when night fell, he realized his mistake. Alex woke to a familiar sound. A quiet, childish cry. It was coming from Elena's bathroom. He shot up from the couch where he'd been sleeping. "Lena!" he yelled. Elena ran out of her bedroom. "What is it? Do you hear that?" She listened. "Alex, it's quiet." But he could hear it. The crying was getting louder. He understood. It wasn't the house. It had never been the house. The entity wasn't attached to the place. It was attached to him. And wherever he went, it would follow. Elena couldn't hear the crying, but she saw the terror on Alex's face, and that was enough. She didn't argue. She sat him down in the kitchen, brewed some strong tea, and sat across from him. "Alex, tell me everything. From the very beginning. Don't leave out a single detail." And he told her. Not just about the house, but about what had preceded the nightmare. For the first time in a year, he described in detail the day of Anna's death. The argument over some trivial thing that escalated into a fight. How he, angry and hurt, had slammed his foot on the gas, ignoring her pleas to slow down. The rain-slicked road, the loss of control. The car breaking through the guardrail and plunging into the icy river. He talked about how he had escaped through a broken window, how he had tried to open her door, but it was jammed. How the water rapidly filled the car. How he had seen her face, contorted in terror, one last time before the current swept him away. He survived. She didn't. "I killed her, Lena," he whispered, and the tears he had held back for a whole year finally broke free. "It should have been me." Elena listened in silence, her expression serious. Now she was beginning to understand. "It feeds on this," she said quietly. "Your guilt. Your grief. You were at rock bottom, your soul was an open wound, and it just came for the scent of blood." At that moment, a soft creak came from the hallway. They both froze. A floorboard groaned. Then another. Someone was slowly walking down the hall toward the kitchen. "Did you hear that?" Alex whispered. Elena nodded slowly, her eyes fixed on the dark doorway. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. A few seconds of ringing silence stretched on. Then the doorknob slowly, creakily, began to turn down. The door rattled, but it was latched shut. A soft, disappointed sigh was heard from the other side. Then the footsteps began to retreat. Elena jumped up and ran into the hallway. It was empty. The front door was double-locked. The next 3 hours became their own personal hell. The presence no longer hid. It began an all-out war. There were knocks on the walls, the windows. An icy draft swept through the kitchen, though all the windows were closed. The light bulb above the table began to flicker, and then went out with a soft pop. They sat in the dark, illuminated only by the light of a street lamp outside the window. And the entire time, the ceaseless crying of a child echoed from the bathroom. Elena could hear it now too. Not as clearly as Alex, but more like a nagging, ultrasonic squeal at the edge of her hearing that gave her a headache and chilled her to the bone. She no longer had any doubts. What Alex was facing was real. And it was here, in her apartment. It had come for him, and it wasn't planning on leaving. As dawn broke and the sounds in the apartment subsided, Elena knew that psychotherapy was useless here. They needed a different kind of help. She thought of Marcus. He wasn't a doctor or a priest. Marcus was different. An old friend of her late father, a historian, an antiques collector, a man who believed the world was far more complex and ancient than we were taught to think. Her father used to jokingly call him a ghost hunter, but there was always respect in his voice. She found his number in an old address book. "Marcus, it's Elena, Richard's daughter," she said when the elderly man answered. "We need your help." She briefly outlined the situation. Marcus listened attentively, without interrupting, asking only a few clarifying questions. "When did it start? What exactly do you hear? Have there been physical manifestations?" "I'll be there by evening," he finally said. "Don't do anything. Don't try to talk to it. Don't show any aggression. Just wait. And Elena, be strong. For him." The wait was torture. The entity, as if knowing reinforcements were coming, changed its tactics. The aggression vanished. In its place came a creepy, twisted game. The TV in the living room turned itself onto a channel playing old black and white cartoons. A small red ball suddenly appeared in the middle of the room, where nothing had been before. It bounced a few times on its own and then stopped. Alex, exhausted and empty, just sat and watched. It was like the behavior of a child trying to get attention. But this child's play radiated a deathly chill. The drawing was the worst. Alex found it on the kitchen table when he went to get some water. It was drawn with wax crayons, in a child's hand. The picture showed a car falling from a bridge into a blue, wavy river. One stick figure was climbing out of the car, while another remained inside. And on the river bank stood a third, small stick figure, waving at them. Underneath the drawing was a clumsy signature. Daniel. When the doorbell rang that evening, Alex jumped. Marcus was standing on the threshold. He was a tall, thin man in his 70s, with gray hair tied back in a ponytail and incredibly sharp, lively eyes. He came in carrying an old leather satchel that smelled of dust and herbs. He didn't waste time on small talk. He slowly walked around the apartment, touching the walls, peering into dark corners. He stopped at the bathroom door. He stood there for a few seconds listening. "Yes, it's here," he said quietly, turning to Alex and Elena. "And it's very strong." The historian looked directly into Alex's eyes, and his gaze was so deep it seemed he could see not only the fear but also what was hiding behind it. "You are mistaken in thinking this is the ghost of a boy," Marcus said. "What is here is much, much older. It is simply wearing his face like a mask." Marcus's words hung in the air, cold and heavy. "What do you mean?" Elena asked. "The thing haunting Alex is not the soul of Daniel Henderson," Marcus explained, laying out the contents of his satchel on the table: bundles of dried herbs, ancient leather-bound books, flasks with murky liquids. "This is an entity of a different order. Non-human. These things have no form of their own. They are chameleons. They take on the appearance that will be most effective. For Alex, tormented by grief and guilt over his wife's death by water, what could be more effective than the image of a drowned child?" He picked up an old book. "These entities are drawn to strong emotions like moths to a flame. Grief, despair, guilt, for them, it is a feast. It sensed Alex's pain the very moment his world collapsed. And it latched on. The house was just a stage, a catalyst. The real battlefield is here." Marcus gently tapped Alex's temple. Alex listened, and the puzzle in his head began to come together. The children's games, the drawings, the image of the boy, it was all a disguise, a way to get closer, to gain his trust, to play on his feelings. "Can we exorcise it?" the architect asked with a glimmer of hope. Marcus shook his head. "It's too late. It's already too deep inside. An exorcism in his current state could kill you. It's not just a guest in your home, it has become a parasite in your soul. We can't cut it out without damaging the host." "Then what do we do?" Elena asked desperately. "We have to lock it away," Marcus replied. "Perform a ritual that will turn Alex's soul into a cage for this monster. It will be with him forever, but it will be stripped of its power to harm him or others. He will become his own jailer." The prospect was horrifying. To carry this evil within him for the rest of his days. But it was better than the alternative. "I agree," Alex said firmly. Marcus nodded and began to prepare. He explained that the ritual would be long and dangerous. The entity would realize what they were trying to do and would fight back with all its might. While the historian was drawing a complex pattern of salt and crushed herbs on the living room floor, he sent Alex to the bathroom to wash his face and clear his head before the ordeal. Alex entered the bathroom, trying not to look at the drain. He turned on the water, splashed his face with the cold stream. When he lifted his head and looked in the mirror, he screamed. His reflection was there in the mirror. Same clothes, same hair, same tired face. But the eyes were not his. Instead of blue irises and pupils, there were two black, bottomless pits, as if someone had burned them out down to the very soul. And this reflection, his doppelganger with eyes of pure darkness, slowly, very slowly, smiled at him. Alex flew out of the bathroom, his face as white as a sheet. "It's in the mirror! My eyes!" Marcus, without a word, went into the bathroom. He returned a moment later. "There's no one there. Your reflection is normal. It's already starting to break your perception of reality. Soon you won't be able to tell what's real and what isn't. We have very little time." He finished his preparations. In the center of the living room, a large circle of salt was drawn, filled with complex symbols. 4 white candles were placed around its perimeter. "Alex, you will need to be in the center of the circle," Marcus instructed. "Elena, you will be outside, next to me. Your job is to support him, to talk to him, to keep him from giving in to fear or illusions. Whatever happens, whatever you see or hear, no one is to cross the line of the circle. Neither in nor out. It is our only protection." He looked at Alex. "The most important thing is that you must fight. The entity will attack you from within, trying to seize your mind. You must resist. Imagine your mind as a house, and yourself as its master. You must not allow this uninvited guest to take it over. Close all the doors, all the windows. Don't let it find a way in." Alex nodded, though he was shaking all over. He sat in the center of the circle, crossing his legs. Marcus lit the candles and began to chant in a strange, guttural language. It wasn't Latin, but something much, much older. As soon as the first words left his lips, the atmosphere in the apartment changed. The air grew thick and cold, as if they had been submerged to the bottom of an icy lake. The candle flames flickered, stretching tall, but did not go out. And the apartment began to shake. At first, it was a light tremor, like a truck passing by. But it quickly intensified, turning into strong, violent jolts. Books fell from the shelves, dishes rattled in the kitchen. It felt as if the entire building had flown into a rage, trying to throw off its unwanted guests. "It's using the energy of the place," Marcus shouted, not stopping his chant. "Hold on." Alex sat in the circle, feeling an icy cold seep into his body. He closed his eyes, trying to focus, to build that fortress-like house in his mind that Marcus had spoken of. But his thoughts were in turmoil. It was no longer one child's voice in his head, but a whole choir. Hundreds of voices were screaming, crying, begging for help, accusing him. "Alex!" Elena's voice reached him as if from a great distance. "Don't listen to them. It's a lie. You're stronger than this." He clung to her voice like a life raft. He pictured his old house, the one where he had been happy with Anna. He began to mentally lock it down. He bolted the front door. He locked the windows. He went upstairs to lock the bedroom. And then he realized the bathroom door was open. And from the darkness of the doorway, 2 black, night-like eyes were staring at him. The moment Alex realized the breach in his mental defenses, the entity struck. The siege had truly begun. Outside, in the real world, the tremors stopped. In their place, an assault began. The front door shuddered from a powerful blow, as if a battering ram had struck it. Then another, and another. The wood splintered, the lock groaned. "It's trying to get in," Elena cried. "It's already inside," Marcus retorted, raising his voice to be heard over the noise. "This is just a diversion. Pay it no mind." Blows rained down from all sides, on the windows, on the walls. It seemed as if dozens of invisible beings were trying to break in. The glass in the windows spiderwebbed with cracks but didn't shatter, held by the unseen power of the ritual. Then, from every crack, from the vents, from under the baseboards, the familiar black, oily liquid began to seep out. It slowly but relentlessly covered the floor, the walls, the ceiling, turning Elena's cozy apartment into a likeness of a rotting, underwater cave. The smell of river silt became unbearable. Inside Alex's mind, a battle of its own was raging. The voices merged into one deafening roar. He saw images that flashed with kaleidoscopic speed, a drowning Anna, the vanished Daniel, nameless victims who had drowned in dark waters. They all looked at him with accusation. The entity tried to break Elena as well. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw a shadow form in the corner of the room. The shadow solidified into the figure of their father, who had died of a heart attack 5 years ago. "Lena, my darling," the figure whispered in his voice. "What are you doing? This man is deceiving you. Let me out of here. Help me." Elena froze, her heart clenching with pain and longing. But she remembered Marcus's warning. "You're not my father!" she shouted, her voice trembling. "Get out!" The figure's face twisted in fury for a moment, and then it dissolved into the air. Marcus stood unshakable, his voice never wavering as he recited the incantation. He was a rock in the center of this storm. Alex felt he was losing. The creature in his head had broken through the bathroom door, and was now roaming the house of his mind, defiling every happy memory. It showed him happy moments with Anna, but at the end of each one, she would look at him with her drowned eyes and whisper, "It's your fault." He was on the verge of giving up, of dissolving into this ocean of pain and despair. The circle of salt, his only physical protection, began to darken, saturated with the black sludge. The candle flames had nearly died. They were losing. Realizing that brute force and mental attacks couldn't completely break them, the entity resorted to its most insidious weapon, love. The banging on the walls stopped. The screams fell silent. The black sludge ceased its flow. A sudden, deafening quiet fell over the apartment. And in that silence, a figure appeared from the hallway. It was Anna. Not the drowned woman with seaweed in her hair, but the Anna Alex remembered and loved. In her favorite summer dress, a smile on her face. She looked completely real. She walked to the very edge of the salt circle and reached out her hands to Alex. "Honey," she said in her gentle, familiar voice. "What's happening? Why are you sitting in there? That old man is scaring me. Come with me. Step out of the circle." Alex looked up and saw her. His heart skipped a beat. All his determination, all his struggle, evaporated in an instant. It was her. His Anna. "Anna?" he whispered. "Of course, it's me, darling. I came back. I didn't die. I've been looking for you all this time. And now I'm here. Please come to me. I'm so scared." He started to get to his feet, ready to cross the line to embrace her. "Alex, no!" Elena screamed. "That's not her. It's a trap. Shut up!" he snapped, his eyes fixed on Anna. "You don't understand anything. She's alive!" Marcus stopped chanting. He looked directly at the figure and said in a firm, commanding voice, "You have no right to use her form. Show your true face, you monster!" The smile vanished from Anna's face. Her features began to distort, to melt like wax. The gentle voice turned into a low, gurgling snarl. The dress rotted away, revealing the pale, bloated body of a drowned woman. "You will pay for everything!" she roared in a voice that was a mixture of hundreds of drowned souls. "I will take his soul, and then I will come for you!" The sight of this monster, and its threats sobered Alex. He collapsed back into the center of the circle, covering his face with his hands. The illusion had shattered, leaving only nauseating horror and bitterness in its wake. Marcus began chanting again, but now his voice carried new, more powerful notes. "It has shown its true nature," he said. "It is furious. This is our chance. Now that it has revealed itself, I can find its name. To know an enemy's name is to have power over them. It was an ancient law that applied in the world of humans and in the world of those who dwelled beyond it." Marcus opened another book, an old, battered tome with no cover. The pages were filled with symbols and names, handwritten in several languages. "It's connected to water, to grief, to deception," Marcus muttered, running his finger quickly down the lines. "It uses the image of a child but feeds on the pain of an adult." He began to read the names aloud. He pronounced each name clearly and authoritatively, infusing it with power. "Aziel, spirit of the flooded caves, I call to you." The apartment shook slightly, but the monstrous figure of Anna only laughed maliciously. "Glimmer, devourer of tears, show yourself!" A ripple ran through the walls, like on the surface of water, but nothing else happened. Marcus listed dozens of names, ancient and forgotten. With each name spoken, the pressure in the room grew. The air crackled with tension. The entity began to show signs of agitation. It no longer laughed, but hissed and snarled, retreating into the shadows. Alex sat in the circle, listening to this grim roll call. He could feel the creature inside him thrashing, like a caged animal being prodded with a hot iron. "Nimrod, Lord of the Swamp Mires. Orbax, collector of drowned souls." And then Marcus spoke a name that made everything shudder. "Mordrim! Spirit of the dark pool, the whisperer in the pipes. I know your name!" The moment the name was spoken, everything froze. Absolute silence. And then, from the mouth of the monstrous figure, erupted a deafening shriek of rage and pain. It was so powerful that the remaining glass in the windows shattered into pieces. An icy, hurricane-force wind tore through the apartment, ripping paintings from the walls, overturning furniture. It swirled around the salt circle, trying to break through. All the candles were extinguished at once, plunging the room into a darkness broken only by the dim light from the street. The figure of Anna began to disintegrate, turning into a vortex of black water and shadows. "You will regret this, mortal!" boomed the voice of Mordrim, no longer hidden behind any guise. "The name has been spoken!" Marcus yelled over the roar of the storm. "Now I can seal it! Alex, get ready! This is going to hurt!" The name was the key. Marcus, standing against the hurricane-force wind that felt like it could strip flesh from bone, began to recite the final part of the incantation. He was no longer just reading words from a book. He was weaving the name, Mordrim, into them, repeating it over and over like a hammer striking an anvil. Each utterance of the name was like a blow to the swirling mass of darkness. It writhed, howled, and thrashed around the room, but it could not break free from the invisible bonds of the spell. "Mordrim, I bind you!" Marcus's voice boomed. "Mordrim, I lock you away!" He pointed at Alex. "This soul is your prison. This body is your shackles. In the name of all that is light, I sentence you to eternal confinement. Mordrim!" When he shouted the name for the last time, something terrible happened. The entire vortex of darkness, all the black sludge covering the apartment, all the pain and fear that had accumulated in that room, rushed toward a single point, Alex. It was like water going down a drain. Torrents of darkness ripped from the walls and ceiling and, with incredible speed, flooded into the salt circle, pouring into Alex's body. He screamed. It was an inhuman scream, filled with an agony no mortal could possibly endure. His body arched, his eyes rolled back. He could feel the icy, malevolent entity pouring into him, filling every cell, penetrating the most hidden corners of his soul, burning everything in its path. It wasn't just pain. It was defilement. Elena watched in horror, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't dare move. The process seemed to last an eternity, though in reality, it was only a matter of seconds. When the last shred of darkness was absorbed into Alex, his scream was cut short, and he collapsed to the floor unconscious. And in that instant, everything stopped. The wind died down. The noise vanished. A dead, absolute silence fell over the ruined apartment. Marcus sank heavily into a chair, deathly pale and exhausted. Elena rushed toward the circle, but he stopped her. "Wait." He approached Alex and knelt beside him. He placed his fingers on his neck. "He's alive," he breathed. Together, they carried Alex out of the defiled circle and laid him on the sofa, the only piece of furniture that had survived the chaos. When Alex came to an hour later, he felt emptiness. The apartment was clean. He no longer felt the oppressive presence, no longer heard the whispers. But deep, deep inside him, he felt a cold, heavy lump. Something alien and cold, sleeping in the depths of his soul. The battle was won. But he knew now that the war would last forever. He had become the key and the lock on the door of the well where his personal demon was imprisoned. Alex screamed. It was a choked, animalistic cry of terror that he forced from his lungs as he staggered back from the sink. He slammed his back against the bathroom door, his hand fumbling for the knob. He couldn't tear his eyes away from his reflection. The doppelganger with the black eyes was still standing by the sink. It didn't move, only its lips stretched into a slow, ghastly smile, revealing far too many teeth. It raised a hand, not its own, his, Alex's hand, and slowly pressed its palm against the surface of the mirror from the other side. There was a soft crack. From the point of contact, a thin, web-like crack spread across the mirror. "Where will you go?" a voice whispered in Alex's head. Now it was a mix of a child's whisper and the deep, gurgling tone of Mortem itself. "We are already here." That whisper was the final straw. Alex spun around and threw his whole body against the door, bursting out into the hallway. He stumbled and fell to his knees, gasping for air, his heart hammering against his ribs like a caged bird. "Alex!" Elena was by his side in a second, with Marcus close behind. "What happened?" "The mirror," he rasped, pointing at the ajar bathroom door. My reflection." Marcus, without hesitation, stepped inside. Elena helped Alex to his feet. He was shaking so violently he could barely stand. A moment later, Marcus emerged, his face grim. "The mirror is cracked. But there's no one there." "It was there." Alex clutched Elena's arm, seeking support. "It had black eyes. It was smiling at me." "And the voice?" "I heard it in my head." "I believe you," Elena said firmly, though her eyes betrayed her shock. "It's beginning," Marcus said quietly, and his words sounded like a death sentence. "What I told you about. It will distort reality, use your own face against you. This is the first test of strength. It's checking how strong the walls of your mind are." They returned to the wrecked living room, which now looked like a battlefield after a lost fight. Alex collapsed onto the sofa. They wrapped him in a scratchy wool blanket, but he couldn't get warm. The cold was coming from within. It had settled inside, at the very core of his being. This cold would never leave him. Marcus bent over the old book again, frantically flipping through the pages filled with faded ink. "There must be something. Iona couldn't have just described the problem without offering a solution. Containment, protection, strengthening." Elena sat across from Alex. She took a small flask and a first aid kit from her bag. After treating the scrapes on her own shoulder, she offered the flask to Alex. "Drink. It'll help." Alex took a sip. The burning brandy momentarily dulled the icy terror. "Thanks. We need a plan," she said, her voice steady and businesslike, as if she were discussing a failed business project, not a demonic invasion. Her composure was somewhat calming. "We can't stay here forever. We need to leave in the morning. The question is, where? Wherever we go, we'll take it with us," Alex whispered. "Yes," Marcus confirmed, not looking up from his book. "You are now a walking haunted house. We don't need a place, we need a method. A way to strengthen your will, your mind, so you can keep it in check. To turn your soul into its prison. A prison. A life sentence with a monster in his own head." The prospect was so monstrous that Alex almost laughed in despair. "Here!" Marcus exclaimed. He turned the book so they could see. On the page was a complex pattern, resembling a Celtic knot woven into the image of a human heart. The guardian of the heart. It's not a ritual. It's a mental discipline. A meditation. A way to build a bastion within yourself that the entity cannot overcome. But it requires immense concentration and willpower. Iona writes that he practiced it until the end of his days. "So it can be learned?" Elena asked hopefully. "It can. But it takes time. And a calm environment. And Mortem will give us either. It will attack. It will hit where it hurts most." As if to confirm his words, Alex felt the room around him begin to swim. He blinked, and the warm light of the candles in the wrecked living room disappeared. He was sitting behind the wheel of his car. Next to him, in the passenger seat, sat Anna. Rain was pouring outside, drops drumming on the roof, the wipers sliding monotonously across the windshield. He recognized this moment. The last moment. "Don't you think you're going a little too fast, honey?" she asked. Everything was just like before. Every word. Every detail. But he knew it wasn't real. It was a trap. "You're not real," Alex whispered. Anna turned her head toward him. Her face was pale, her hair soaked, but she was smiling her usual, loving smile. "Of course I'm real. I'm always with you." She reached out and touched his cheek. Her fingers were ice cold, as if she had just stepped out of a freezer. "Why didn't you come with me, Alex?" she whispered, her smile turning sad. "You left me all alone. It was so dark. And so cold." "No." He tried to break free, but his body wouldn't obey. He was pinned to the driver's seat, his hands gripping the steering wheel in a death grip. "The water kept rising," she continued, her voice growing quieter, turning into a gurgling whisper. "It filled my mouth, my lungs. I called for you. But you didn't come." At that moment, her eyes changed. The irises vanished, and they turned into two black, bottomless pits. The smile became a predatory grin. "You let me drown!" she roared in Mordrim's voice, and at the same instant, the windshield shattered, and a torrent of icy, black water flooded the car. "Alex!" He opened his eyes. He was lying on the floor, and Elena was shaking him by the shoulders. Marcus stood nearby with a lit smudged stick of sage, the acrid smoke filling the room. Alex gasped for air. He was in the living room. Dry. Safe. But the terror of the experience was absolutely real. He touched his face and felt something wet and sticky under his nose. He looked at his fingers. They were smeared with a dark, almost black liquid with the disgusting smell of river silt. He looked at Elena and Marcus, his eyes filled with a silent question and horror. They had seen it all. They were looking not at him, but at what was inside him. He tried to say something, to apologize, to explain. But the words stuck in his throat. Instead, his lips twisted on their own into a cold, alien smirk. He felt control over his own face slipping away. And from his mouth, in his own voice, yet with deep, otherworldly overtones, came the phrase, "She was so cold." For a second, absolute darkness flashed in his eyes. And then the possession receded. He was himself again, staring in horror at the fear-frozen faces of his friends. The passenger had just taken the wheel for the first time. And this was only the beginning of a ride to hell. The phrase, "She was so cold," spoken in Alex's voice but with a monstrous, otherworldly intonation, hung in the air, freezing the very silence. The possession receded as quickly as it had come, leaving Alex with wide, terrified eyes, staring at the frozen faces of his friends. He was master of his own body again, but the sickening feeling of defilement, as if someone had walked through his soul with muddy boots, remained. Elena was the first to recover. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with a steely resolve. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step forward and gripped Alex's shoulders firmly. "Alex! Listen to me! That is not you! Do you hear me? That is not you! Fight it!" Her touch and her firm voice became an anchor in the raging sea of his panic. I couldn't do anything," he whispered, his voice trembling. "I just watched as it used me." "It feeds on your guilt," Marcus interjected. He dropped the smoldering sage stick into an ashtray, his hands shaking slightly. "It took your most painful memory and turned it into a weapon. It will do this again and again until it breaks you. Then we won't give it the chance." Elena cut in, not letting go of Alex. She looked at Marcus. "Your book. That. Guardian of the Heart. We're starting right now. Here? After this?" Marcus doubted. "He needs rest, peace. His mind is an open wound right now. Peace is the last thing we have," she countered. "Every minute we delay gives that thing more time to take root. We will fight. Here and now. Alex, are you ready?" Alex looked into her eyes, then at Marcus, who, despite his doubts, was already opening the book to the right page. In their faces he saw fear, but he also saw a readiness to stand with him until the end. He was not alone in this prison. He had guards. "Yes," he said firmly, though his entire being screamed otherwise. "What do I have to do?" "Sit," Marcus commanded. "Sit on the floor, cross-legged. Close your eyes." Alex obeyed. He sat on the cold wooden floor, trying to ignore the blackened circle from the ritual, which now seemed like a portal to his own personal hell. "The guardian of the heart is not a prayer or a spell," Marcus began to explain, his voice calm and measured, like a lecturer's. "It is an act of creation. You must build a fortress in your mind, an impregnable citadel that this entity cannot access. And like any fortress, it must have a foundation." He paused. "You need to find a memory. The purest, brightest one you have. A moment of absolute, untainted happiness. Something Mordrim cannot defile. This will be your cornerstone. Find it, Alex." Closing his eyes, Alex plunged into the darkness of his consciousness. But it was no longer just darkness. It was damp, cold, and he could hear a quiet, barely perceptible sound of dripping water. He tried to ignore it, to dig deeper into his memories. Happiness. What was happiness? The first thing that came to mind was his wedding day. He and Anna, young, laughing under a shower of rice and rose petals. But as soon as he focused on Anna's face, her smile distorted for a moment, and a shadow of black water flickered in her eyes. "You promised to be with me forever," a voice whispered in his head. Alex flinched. "I can't," he said aloud. "It's poisoning everything connected to her." "I know. That was to be expected," Marcus replied calmly. "So dig deeper. Before Anna. Childhood. Something simple. Something that belongs only to you." Alex forced himself to focus again. Childhood. Summer days at his grandfather's farm. The smell of freshly cut grass. Warm milk. He tried to grasp these images, but they were too vague, like old photographs. And then he found it. A small, almost forgotten fragment. He's about 7 years old. He's sitting in the backyard of his old house. It's evening, the setting sun painting the clouds orange and pink. In his arms is his first dog, a golden retriever named Buddy. The puppy, clumsy and warm, is sleeping on his lap, breathing trustingly. And he, a little boy, is stroking its soft fur and feeling an absolute, all-encompassing peace. No fears. No worries. Just the warmth of a living creature, and the quiet of a summer evening. "I found it," Alex whispered. "Hold on to it," Marcus instructed. "Don't just remember it. Relive it. Feel the puppy's warmth. The smell of the grass. See the colors of the sunset. Make that memory real. This is your foundation. Now start building the walls. Imagine that feeling of peace and safety growing, surrounding you on all sides like a stone wall. Thick. Impenetrable." Alex focused. He was that boy again. He could feel the puppy's weight, hear its breathing. And around this island of peace, he began to mentally erect a wall. Brick by brick. Each brick was a feeling of safety, warmth, love. The sound of dripping water in his head grew louder, more insistent, turning into the sound of rain. "A little boy in the dark?" Mordrim's voice hissed, trying to break through the wall. "You think walls will save you? I am the ocean. I will flood your pathetic kennel. I will take your puppy and drag it to the bottom." The image of Buddy on his lap trembled, rippled like a reflection in water. The puppy whimpered, its warm body turning cold and wet. "Don't let it!" Elena shouted, her voice breaking through the illusion. "This is your territory, Alex! Your soul! Throw it out!" Her words hit him like an electric shock. Rage, pure and primal, flared in Alex's chest. "This is mine. You will not touch this." He clung to the bright image with a death grip. He imagined the sun, that same setting sun from his memory, burning brighter, turning into a dazzling ball of light. The rays of this sun struck the dark water, vaporizing it, pushing it back. "Get out!" he roared in his mind. In the living room, a light bulb in a floor lamp exploded with a deafening pop, showering the floor with a rain of hot fragments. The window overlooking the garden was covered in a web of cracks radiating from the center, as if an invisible fist had struck it. Alex opened his eyes, breathing heavily. The sound of water in his head had subsided, replaced by a ringing silence. He was as exhausted as if he had been unloading train cars all night, but for the first time in many hours he felt something like control. He had managed to fight back. Marcus looked at the shattered window, then at Alex. There was fear in his eyes, mixed with a hint of admiration. "Your prison, it has power," he said. "When you fight back, the energy spills out." "We can't stay here," Elena said, getting to her feet. She looked at the clock on the wall. "Almost 2 in the morning. This apartment is no longer safe. Not for us, not for Alex. Every one of his battles will destroy it. We have to get out." "Where?" Alex asked. "I know a place," Marcus replied, closing the book. "An old monastery in the mountains, where a colleague of my great-great-grandfather once lived. It's abandoned, but they say the land itself there is clean. Far from water. Far from everything. If there's any place where you can learn to build your fortress, it's there." The decision was made. They would leave this place at first light. A long road to the mountains, into the unknown, awaited them. Alex looked at his friends, then at the cracked window, beyond which the night's darkness was thickening. This was not an escape. It was a tactical retreat. The war was just beginning, and the next battle would be fought on new, even more dangerous ground. They left the apartment at dawn. The gray, indifferent morning light seeped through the cracked window, illuminating a scene of destruction. The air was heavy, smelling of ozone, sage smoke, and stale fear. They packed in silence, moving like automatons. Every rustle, every creak of the floorboards grated on their frayed nerves. The place that was supposed to be a sanctuary had become hostile territory, and they were glad to leave it. The journey ahead was long. Marcus took the wheel of his old SUV, with Elena beside him to navigate. Alex was put in the back seat. He'd been given a sedative, but it barely worked. He sat staring out the window, watching the familiar suburban streets give way to the endless highway. The blanket they had covered him with provided no warmth. The cold was inside him, and no blanket could quell it. The first few hours passed in oppressive silence. Mordrum was lying low. Alex could feel its presence the way one feels a tumor in their own body, a foreign, malignant growth latched onto his soul. He tried to practice the breathing exercises Marcus had hastily taught him, focusing on reality, the feel of the rough seat fabric, the scent of the car air freshener, the monotonous hum of the tires. After about 100 miles it began. First, the radio. Marcus had turned it on to break the silence, catching some classic rock station. But suddenly, the music was cut off by a sharp screech of static. "Damn cell towers," Marcus muttered, twisting the tuning knob. But instead of another station, a quiet, distorted melody began to pour from the speakers. A children's lullaby. The same one he had heard from the drain in his bathroom. "Turn it off!" Alex shouted, his hands gripping the headrest in front of him. Marcus slammed the button, and the music stopped. But in the ensuing silence, Alex could still hear its echo in his head. "It's playing with me," he whispered. "Breathe, Alex," Elena said calmly, without turning. "Focus on your memory. The fortress. Build the walls." He closed his eyes. The puppy. The sunset. The warmth. He tried, but the images were blurry. Suddenly he felt a hand on his shoulder. He thought it was Elena or Marcus trying to calm him. He opened his eyes and slowly turned his head. Sitting next to him, where a moment ago there had been an empty seat, was a boy. Pale, soaking wet, with blue lips. Daniel. He lifted his large, sad eyes to Alex, and for a moment, they flashed with a coal-black intensity. "I'm cold," he rustled, and the smell of silt and decay spread through the car from his voice. Why did you abandon me? Alex screamed and recoiled, pressing himself against the car door. The SUV swerved. Alex, what is it? Marcus asked anxiously, straightening the wheel. The boy. He's here. Elena whipped around. The back seat was empty, except for a crumpled blanket. There's no one there, Alex, she yelled. It's an illusion. Fight it. But he wasn't listening anymore. He was looking in the side mirror. And in the reflection, he saw not himself, but his own face with eyes as black as the abyss. The reflection smiled at him and moved its lips silently, forming the words. You can't run. Stop the car! Alex roared, losing control. He lunged forward, trying to grab the steering wheel. Alex, no! Elena tried to hold him back. The car skidded. With a screech of tires, the SUV spun across the road. Marcus barely kept it from crashing into the ditch. The engine stalled. For a few seconds, they all sat frozen, breathing heavily. I'm sorry. Alex choked out, slumping in his seat. I can't. I can't. You can't, Marcus said firmly. He started the engine and pulled back onto the highway. You fought it back once. You can do it again. Elena, talk to him. Don't let him fall into it. The next few hours of the journey became both torture and an emergency therapy session. Elena talked to Alex nonstop. She made him describe everything he saw out the window. Count the passing cars. Recall the names of his school teachers. Anything to anchor his mind to reality. And Marcus drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. And gradually, as the road began to climb into the mountains, something changed. The air outside became different, cleaner, cooler. The dense, damp forests gave way to rocky slopes covered with pine trees. Alex felt the pressure in his head begin to ease. It didn't disappear, but it became less intrusive. The whispers quieted. When they finally turned onto a deserted dirt road leading to the monastery, the sun was setting. They stopped at a pair of dilapidated stone gates. Before them lay the ruins of an ancient monastery. Moss-covered walls, arches open to the wind, and silence. A deep, all-encompassing silence, broken only by the rustle of the wind in the pines. There was no sound of water here. Only stone and sky. They found what they were looking for, a small, almost timeless building with a single cell inside. Stone walls, a narrow slit window looking out at the mountain peaks, and a floor paved with ancient flagstones. The place felt clean. Here, said Marcus. If you're going to make a stand, there's no better place. Night fell on the mountains. They lit a few candles, their flickering light snatching the rough stone walls from the darkness. Elena and Marcus stayed outside, at the entrance to the cell. This was a battle Alex had to fight alone. He sat in the middle of the cell, cross-legged, as Marcus had taught him. He closed his eyes and prepared himself. Mordrum was waiting for him. This time, it didn't hide. The darkness in Alex's consciousness condensed, becoming a vast, black ocean under a stormy sky. At the center of this ocean was him, Alex, on a tiny, barely visible island of light, his memory of the puppy. Have you come to die? Mordrum's voice thundered, seeming to come from all directions at once. Waves of black water crashed against his island with a roar. But Alex held on. He clung to the image of the warm, sleeping puppy. Mordrum changed tactics. Anna appeared before Alex, as she had been in her final seconds, choking, her eyes filled with terror. You could have saved me, she whispered, and her body dissolved into the water. Then the children appeared. Dozens, hundreds of children with blue faces and empty eyes. They reached for him with their hands from the dark water. You didn't save us, they whispered in unison. You didn't save him either. Daniel is still with us. Here. The pain and guilt were unbearable. Alex felt his island of light shrinking, the darkness closing in. He was ready to give up. But then he remembered Elena's words. That is not you. And Marcus's words. This is a lifelong fight. He didn't have to win. He had to contain. He stopped fighting the waves. Instead, he focused on his island of light. He began to expand it. He remembered not just the puppy. He remembered his mother's laugh, his father's firm handshake, his first bike ride, the taste of his grandmother's apple pie. Every bright, pure memory became another stone in the wall of his inner fortress. The walls grew, rising from the raging ocean. They were not walls of stone. They were walls of love, light, and forgiveness. He forgave himself. He couldn't have saved Anna, but he had loved her. He couldn't have saved Daniel, but he mourned for him. His grief and his love became his strength. Mordrum roared in fury, feeling its power slipping away. The ocean turned into a violent whirlpool, trying to destroy the walls. But they held. Alex looked into the heart of the darkness, and for the first time, he saw not just a monster. He saw an infinite, all-consuming loneliness. A being that could only imitate, reflect the pain of others, because it had nothing of its own. And then Alex did something Mordrum never expected. He stopped building the walls outward. He began to build them inward, enclosing the raging ocean in a sphere of light within his fortress. He wasn't casting it out. He was accepting it. As his eternal burden. As his eternal prisoner. Outside, in the doorway of the cell, Elena and Marcus saw the candles extinguish all at once, as if blown out by an invisible wind. For a second, the cell was plunged into absolute darkness. And then, just as suddenly, the candles flared back to life. Alex was sitting in the same spot. He slowly opened his eyes. They were his eyes. Tired, infinitely sad, but his. There was no longer darkness in their depths. There was only silence. He got to his feet and walked toward them. "It's done," he said. His voice was calm. "Is it gone?" Elena asked hopefully. Alex looked at the mountain peaks, bathed in the cold light of the moon. A shadow of a smile touched his lips, not a happy one, but a peaceful one. "No," he answered. "It will never be gone. But I've built a good prison. It's very quiet in here now." He remained at the monastery. Elena and Marcus visited him, bringing food and books. He became the keeper of that place, and his own eternal guardian. Sometimes, on long nights when the wind howled among the ruins, he could feel his prisoner stirring in the darkness of his soul. But the walls held, and no one ever heard the screams from the drain again. They were forever silenced in the quiet of his heart.